The ship begins to move at 6 o'clock in the evening, and nobody aboard quite agrees on the moment it happens. There is no lurch, no obvious shift of weight, no sound that distinguishes the first centimeters of motion from the stillness of a berthed vessel. The gangways are gone. The mooring lines have been retrieved through the fairleads and coiled on deck. The dock is still visible through the balcony door. The terminal building and the cranes and the road beyond the fence still present and familiar. And then, very slowly, the gap between the ship and the dock begins to widen. The dock is moving, or the ship is moving, and for a moment the brain refuses to decide which, because the scale of what is leaving the berth is so large that motion does not register as motion, so much as a slow rearrangement of the world. If this kind of story is how you end your nights, please subscribe right now so you never miss one. Hit the like button. It helps this channel reach more people. And drop a comment telling us where in the world you are and what time it is. We love knowing who is with us. Now, let's go to sea. The port begins its slow migration from a head to a beam to a stern. The water between the hull and the dock, dark green harbour water, slightly clouded, carrying the debris of a busy port, widens into a channel and then into open harbour. The city, which was directly outside the window 20 minutes ago, is now a view. Its particular shape of cranes and buildings and waterfront structures, familiar to the passengers who have spent the day exploring it, becomes a skyline seen from the water, and then a silhouette against the evening sky, and then a line of lights as the sun finishes setting. The ship is underway. This is not a small event. The vessel leaving the berth is 365 meters long. It weighs 250,000 gross tons. It carries, between its 20 decks and its thousands of cabins, and its dozens of restaurants and bars and pools and theatres, more than 9,000 people. It is one of the largest moving structures human beings have ever built, and it is moving through a harbour that accommodates it only just, and in a few hours it will be in open ocean, and the city it is leaving will be too far away to see. The engines are running, a deep subsonic hum that is felt more than heard in the lower decks, barely perceptible in the higher passenger areas, entirely absent if you are standing on the open top deck watching the lights of the city recede. The azipod propulsion units, the rotating propeller pods mounted below the hull that can turn the ship in any direction without the need for a rudder or conventional tugs, are providing the precise, controlled thrust that the departure requires. The bridge team is watching every instrument, every camera, every navigation display. The pilot, if one is still aboard, will disembark at the harbour entrance. The sun has gone now. The stars are beginning. Ahead, the open water. Behind, the last of the lights. Tonight, the ship is the whole world, and the ocean is waiting. The Icon of the Seas entered service in January 2024, and for a ship to have entered service recently is not unusual. For a ship to have immediately become the largest passenger vessel ever built, and to have done so by a margin significant enough that the previous record holder was not even close, is something else. The Icon of the Seas, built by Meyer Turku in Finland and operated by Royal Caribbean, has a gross tonnage of 250,800, a measure of internal volume rather than weight, but one that gives a sense of the vessel's scale relative to everything that came before it. Its sister ship, Star of the Seas, which entered service in August 2025, shares the same gross tonnage and the same record. At 365 meters in length, each is slightly shorter than 4 soccer pitches placed end to end. The beam, the width, is 65 meters. The ship has 20 decks. It carries 7,600 passengers at double occupancy and 2,350 crew members. A floating community of just under 10,000 people. To put this in context, the Titanic, when she sailed in 1912, had a gross tonnage of 46,000. The Icon of the Seas is approximately 5.5 times larger. The Queen Mary II, which entered service in 2004 and is still one of the most celebrated ocean liners in current operation, has a gross tonnage of 148,000. The Icon of the Seas is significantly larger than the Queen Mary II. The Oasis of the Seas, which was itself the largest cruise ship in the world when it entered service in 2009, has a gross tonnage of 225,000. The generation of ships that followed it has continued to push the boundary upward, each new vessel arriving larger than the one before. The 20 decks span from the machinery spaces deep in the hull, the engine rooms, the azipod propulsion systems, the stabilizer machinery, the desalination plants, the laundry, through the crew accommodation and support spaces, through the passenger accommodation decks, where the staterooms occupy the middle section of the ship, to the upper passenger amenity decks, where the pools and water parks and the open promenades are, and finally to the sun decks at the highest point of the vessel, 16 stories above the waterline, where on a clear day the horizon is visible for approximately 12 kilometers in every direction. 7 swimming pools, 6 water slides, over 40 dining and bar venues, a theatre that seats over 1,000, an ice skating rink, a surf simulator, an open-air aquatheatre for shows performed over a pool at the stern, a full-size water park with the tallest waterfall and the tallest water slide of any cruise ship, a neighbourhood of cabins with direct access to the water park, a dedicated adults-only retreat with an infinity pool suspended over the ocean. All of this is on a ship that is underway, moving through open water at 22 knots. The scale is not accidental. Cruise ships have grown because the economics of cruise lines reward size. The fixed costs of operating a vessel are spread across more passengers as the vessel grows, allowing the cost per passenger to fall even as the overall amenity level rises. A ship carrying 7,000 passengers can offer facilities that would be financially impossible on a ship carrying 2,000, because the cost of the theatre or the ice rink or the water park is divided among 7,000 paying guests rather than 2,000. The world's largest cruise ship is also, from a certain perspective, the world's largest value proposition. 365 meters of floating infrastructure, moving tonight through open water, at 22 knots, carrying nearly 10,000 people into the ocean. The ship did not arrive at the dock fully formed. It was built in pieces, large, heavy, 3-dimensional pieces of steel structure called blocks, each one prefabricated in a workshop at the shipyard before being lifted by crane into position in the dry dock and welded to the blocks already in place. A large cruise ship might consist of 500 or more individual blocks, each one perhaps 15 meters long and weighing several hundred tons, fabricated in sections of the shipyard, and then transported to the dry dock as the construction sequence demands. the Maya Turku shipyard in Turku, Finland, where the icon of the seas and the star of the seas were built, is one of a small number of shipyards in the world capable of constructing vessels of this size and complexity. Large cruise ships require a shipyard with a covered dry dock large enough to contain the vessel, craneage capable of lifting and placing the construction blocks, and a workforce with the specific skills that cruise ship construction demands. The list of shipyards that can build the largest cruise ships is not long. Maya Turku in Finland, Chantiers de l'Atlantique in Saint-Nazaire in France, Fincantieri in Trieste, and Monfalcone in Italy, and a small number of others. Each of these yards has accumulated decades of expertise in a specific and demanding form of engineering. The construction of a large cruise ship takes 2 to 3 years, from the cutting of the first steel to the delivery to the cruise line. The process is not linear. Many things happen simultaneously. While the hull structure is being assembled block by block in the dry dock, other blocks are being prefabricated in the workshop with their interior outfitting already installed. A cabin block might arrive at the dry dock with its floor covering, its wall panels, its plumbing and electrical connections, and even its furniture already in place. The fitting out work that would otherwise need to be done in the confined space of the assembled ship, having been done in the more accessible environment of the workshop floor. This approach, called integrated block outfitting, was refined over decades by the major cruise shipyards and represents a fundamental efficiency compared to the older practice of building the structure first and fitting it out afterwards. When a pre-outfitted block is welded into position in the dry dock, the connections between its internal systems and those of the adjacent blocks must be made. The water pipes aligned and joined, the electrical cables connected, the ventilation ducts linked. This requires extraordinary precision in the planning and in the fabrication. The connections must align exactly because there is very little room to adjust once the block is in position. The ship is floated out of the dry dock. The dock is flooded, the vessel rising on the water for the first time. The structure that has been resting on the blocks and the keel blocks in the dry dock suddenly supported by buoyancy. Typically 6 to 9 months before delivery, when the hull and the superstructure are complete, but the interior fitting out work is still underway. For the remaining months, the ship sits alongside the outfitting quay while hundreds of workers complete the installation of the furniture, the entertainment systems, the galley equipment, the pool decking, the artwork, and the thousands of other elements that transform a completed hull into a functioning cruise ship. The delivery ceremony, the moment the vessel formally passes from the shipyard to the cruise line, is the culmination of perhaps 30 million person-hours of work. The collective expertise of naval architects, marine engineers, interior designers, electrical engineers, plumbers, welders, carpenters, and 100 other trades is contained in the vessel that sits at the quay. Then the crew boards, the provisions, are loaded, the passengers embark, and the ship, assembled over years in a covered dry dock in Finland, sails into the ocean for the first time as itself, as a cruise ship, doing what it was built to do. The ocean receives it, as it receives everything, without comment. The cruise ship does not have a single engine in the way that a car has a single engine, or even in the way that a container ship has a single main engine. It has a power plant. The icon of the seas is powered by 6 Wärtsilä multi-fuel engines, large, high-output internal combustion engines that can run on liquefied natural gas, on conventional marine diesel, or on a combination of both. These engines do not turn the propellers directly. They generate electricity. The electricity is distributed through the ship's electrical system to the azipod propulsion units below the hull, where it powers electric motors that turn the propellers. This configuration, diesel-electric propulsion, is standard on modern, large cruise ships and represents a different philosophy from the direct drive or geared diesel arrangements used in cargo shipping. The advantages of diesel-electric propulsion for a cruise ship are significant. The engines that generate the electricity do not need to be physically connected to the propeller shafts, which means they can be positioned anywhere in the hull where space and weight distribution allow, rather than being constrained to the position that a long propeller shaft would require. The electric power generated by the engines serves both propulsion and hotel load. The enormous electrical demand of keeping 10,000 people comfortable, with lighting, air conditioning, cooking, entertainment systems, and water production, all drawing from the same generating capacity. On a diesel-electric vessel, the propulsion system and the hotel electrical system are part of the same integrated power network, sharing generating capacity flexibly as the demands on each change. The azipod units, a portmanteau of azimuth and pod, are the external propulsion system that makes modern cruise ships so maneuverable. Each azipod is a self-contained propulsion unit, a propeller attached directly to an electric motor housed in a streamlined pod below the hull, mounted on a bearing that allows the entire unit to rotate through 360 degrees. By rotating the azipods, the ship can apply thrust in any horizontal direction, allowing it to maneuver in port with a precision that traditional propeller and rudder arrangements cannot match. A large cruise ship equipped with azipods can berth alongside without the assistance of tugboats in many situations. The azipods providing the sideways and rotational forces that a ship with fixed propellers and a rudder would need tugs to achieve. In calm conditions, the ship can be held stationary in position by the azipods, actively countering any wind or current that is trying to move it. This is the dynamic positioning capability that was originally developed for offshore oil platform supply vessels, where the ability to hold a precise position in open water is operationally critical, and that has been adapted for cruise ship use. The bow thrusters, additional propulsion units installed transversely in tunnels through the bow section of the hull, pushing water sideways rather than backward, supplement the azipods in port maneuvering, providing additional control at low speeds when the azipods are working against their most effective operating range. The 6 Wärtsilä engines aboard the Icon of the Seas can run on liquefied natural gas. LNG burns significantly more cleanly than conventional marine fuel oil. It produces no sulfur emissions, substantially less particulate matter, and approximately 20% less carbon dioxide per unit of energy compared to heavy fuel oil. The LNG is stored in cryogenic tanks aboard the vessel at approximately -160 degrees Celsius, the temperature at which natural gas liquefies, and can be stored in a volume approximately 600 times smaller than it would occupy as a gas at atmospheric pressure. 6 engines, electric propulsion, rotating pods below the hull, and the largest cruise ship in the world maneuvers in port as if it weighs nothing at all. The ocean surrounding the ship is not something the ship is merely floating in. It is a resource. The water that comes out of every tap in every stateroom, that fills every pool, that feeds every kitchen and every laundry. The great majority of it began as seawater, salt-saturated and undrinkable, taken from the ocean through intakes in the hull, and processed aboard the ship into fresh, potable water through a series of engineering systems that operate continuously, day and night, for the entire voyage. A mid-size cruise ship uses approximately 25 to 30 tons of fresh water every hour for drinking, cooking, laundry, showering, pool maintenance, and the cooling and cleaning requirements of the ship's machinery. Over a 7-day voyage, this amounts to roughly 4,000 to 5,000 tons of fresh water. No ship carries this quantity aboard from port. Instead, the ship makes it. The primary method on modern large cruise ships is reverse osmosis. Seawater is drawn into the reverse osmosis plant through intakes in the hull and pressurized to between 50 and 80 times atmospheric pressure. Sufficient force to drive the water molecules through a semi-permeable membrane while leaving the dissolved salts, minerals, and impurities behind. The membrane pores are small enough, in the range of half a nanometer, to pass water molecules while blocking the sodium and chloride ions that make seawater undrinkable. The fresh water that emerges from the membrane, called the permeate, is then treated with minerals to restore the taste profile that pure water lacks, and chlorinated to a safe level for consumption. The concentrated salt solution rejected by the membrane, the brine, is discharged back to the ocean. For every litre of fresh water the reverse osmosis plant produces, approximately 2 litres of brine are rejected. The brine is not discharged close to port or in environmentally sensitive areas, but in open ocean where the salt concentration returns quickly to ambient levels. Royal Caribbean, as the operator of the Icon of the Seas, desalinates up to 90% of its onboard water using these systems. Celebrity Cruises, another Royal Caribbean brand, generates approximately 85% of its water on board. Carnival Cruise Line desalinates up to 75% of its water at sea. The figures vary by vessel and voyage, but the principle is consistent across the modern cruise industry. The ship makes most of what it drinks from the water it is sailing through. The older technology, thermal desalination, using waste heat from the engines to evaporate seawater and condense the resulting water vapor into fresh water, is still in use on some vessels, particularly when the ship is underway and the engines are producing the heat that the thermal evaporators need. Many modern ships use a combination of thermal evaporators when the engines are running and reverse osmosis plants when in port, where the engine heat is not available. The fresh water produced by either method is stored in large tanks distributed through the lower sections of the hull. Tanks that can hold several million litres of processed water, providing a buffer between the production rate and the consumption rate, and ensuring that a temporary stoppage of the production systems does not immediately affect the supply to passengers. The ship is at sea, surrounded by millions of cubic kilometers of ocean, and below the passenger decks, pumps are running and membranes are filtering and tanks are filling. Turning the ocean slowly and continuously into the water that comes out of the tap in your stateroom. The ocean provides. The ship knows how to receive what it provides, and the tap in the cabin runs clear. Before the Icon of the Seas leaves the dock, 180 tons of food have been loaded. not over the course of the voyage, before it begins. 180 tons of provisions, representing a week's supply for 7,600 passengers, and 2,350 crew members, loaded in the turnaround period between the previous sailing and the current one, carried aboard in pallets and trolleys and crates through the service access points on the lower decks, while the cabins above are being cleaned and the gangways above are receiving the new passengers. The figure is not abstract. 180 tons is approximately equal to the weight of the Statue of Liberty. It includes 30 tons of meat and 15 tons of seafood, 28 tons of vegetables, over 13,000 pounds of potatoes, 60,000 eggs, 16,000 bottles of wine and champagne, 120,000 bottles of beer. The fresh produce, the bananas, the tomatoes, the leafy vegetables, is loaded at different stages of ripeness deliberately. Some ready to eat immediately, some still green enough that they will be ready by mid-voyage, some not yet ripe enough to serve until the end of the week. The bananas, which emit ethylene gas that accelerates the ripening of everything around them, are stored separately. The Icon of the Seas has 425 chefs. They work across 36 galleys distributed throughout the ship, individual kitchen spaces specializing in different types of preparation, positioned near the dining venues they serve, connected by service corridors and service elevators to the central provisioning areas below. The main production kitchen, the equivalent of a large restaurant's kitchen, but scaled for a hotel of 7,600 guests, handles the preparation of the core ingredients that are then distributed to the individual galleys for finishing and plating. The operation runs 24 hours. Breakfast preparation begins before the last dinner service of the previous day has finished. While the main dining room and the specialty restaurants are serving dinner, the pastry team is already baking the bread and the croissants for tomorrow morning. While the passengers sleep, the overnight team is preparing mise en place for the breakfast service, portioning proteins for the next day's lunch, producing the stocks and sauces that will underpin the day's menus. 30,000 meals are prepared per day. This number includes all food consumed aboard the vessel, every breakfast in the main dining room, every poolside snack, every room service order, every crew meal. Managing 30,000 meals per day with consistent quality, appropriate food safety, and minimal waste requires the kind of planning and data tracking that would be recognized by any large food service operation, scaled to a size that most food service operations never approach. Royal Caribbean tracks food consumption in real time and uses the data to refine the quantities ordered for subsequent voyages. The passenger demographic influences the provisioning. A sailing with a large proportion of guests from a specific country or culture shifts the menu planning and the quantities of particular ingredients toward the preferences that past data predicts for that group. If a particular dish is consistently left largely unconsumed, less of it is prepared on the next voyage. The ship's kitchens are among the most regulated food service operations in the world. The United States Public Health Service's Vessel Sanitation Program conducts unannounced inspections of cruise ships calling at American ports, inspecting every food storage area, every preparation surface, every cold, room and hot holding system. 180 tons of food, 425 chefs, 30,000 meals a day, and the ocean goes by outside the porthole, indifferent to all of it. The sea day is the cruise experience in its purest form. On a sea day, the ship does not call at a port. The itinerary has a blank where a destination would otherwise be. A day at sea, the schedule reads, and this can be received as either a loss or a gift depending on the disposition of the person receiving it. For a significant proportion of regular cruisers, the sea day is what they come for. The port calls are the punctuation. The sea days are the text. The ship on a sea day is entirely self-contained, in a way that port days are not. On a port day, the majority of passengers disperse ashore for some part of the day. The ship empties and quietens. The crew performs maintenance that requires the passenger areas to be accessible, and the whole character of the vessel shifts toward the operational. On a sea day, everyone is aboard. The pools are full. The dining venues are at full service. The entertainment program runs from morning to late night without the interruption of a port turnaround. The ship must be everything, because there is nothing else available. On the upper decks in the morning of a sea day, the walkers are already out. The people who have discovered that a full circuit of the ship's promenade deck is a measured distance, typically somewhere between 300 and 400 meters per loop, and who have set themselves the goal of covering a certain number of laps before breakfast. They walk the perimeter of the ship with the particular determination of people who are enjoying themselves too much to be exercising for pleasure, and not enough to be exercising for its own sake. The ocean is visible on all sides as they walk. On clear days, there is nothing to see but water and sky. On overcast days, the cloud hangs low over a grey sea that extends to the horizon. The ship moves through both the same way, steadily, at 22 knots, the bow wave audible from the promenade deck as a rushing hiss of disturbed water. The pools fill after breakfast. The loungers on the sun decks are claimed by the strategy of the towel, a practice familiar to anyone who has cruised. The early morning deployment of a personal towel on an unoccupied lounger to establish a claim to it for the day. The pools on a large cruise ship are saltwater or freshwater, depending on the vessel, heated to a maintained temperature regardless of the ambient air temperature. On the icon of the seas, there are 7 of them, ranging from the main pool areas to the adult-only infinity pool, cantilevered over the stern. Below the sun decks, in the interior spaces of the ship, a different kind of sea day is available. The library has chairs and natural light from sea view windows. The spa has treatments booked weeks in advance. The specialty restaurants are available for lunch without the evening reservation pressure. The art gallery is open. The shops are open. The casino is open. The ship has been designed with the sea day in mind, with enough variety of spaces and activities that 10,000 people can spend a day on it without feeling that they have run out of options. And for some passengers, the sea day resolves into none of this. A balcony stateroom in the middle of a sea day is one of the most deliberately quiet experiences that modern leisure provides. A private outdoor space, perhaps 4 meters by 2, with a chair and a railing and the uninterrupted ocean view and the sound of the ship's passage through the water, and no particular obligation to be anywhere or do anything. The ocean goes by. The wake extends behind the ship. The horizon is the edge of the world, the same in every direction, and the ship is the only thing in it. The sea day is not nothing. It is the whole point. The bridge of a large cruise ship is a wide, bright, forward-facing space. Not the dark instrument cave of the container ship's bridge at night, but a room designed to be worked in continuously, with full natural light through the panoramic forward windows during the day, and instrumentation that remains readable in any lighting condition. The cruise ship captain is not primarily a navigator. Navigation on a modern vessel is managed by the navigation officers, who stand their watches on the bridge and manage the vessel's track through whatever waterway the itinerary requires. The captain is the manager of the vessel, the person responsible, under maritime law, for the safety of the ship, the safety of the passengers and crew, the vessel's compliance with international maritime regulations, and the conduct of the voyage. On a ship carrying 10,000 people, this is less the technical leadership of a single expert, and more the executive authority of someone responsible for a moving city. The PAO, integrated bridge system on a modern cruise ship, brings the navigation instruments, the propulsion and maneuvering controls, the dynamic positioning system, and the safety and communication systems into a single, unified display architecture. The officer on watch can see the vessel's GPS position on the electronic chart, the radar picture of the surrounding sea, the AIS targets of other vessels, the current and forecast weather, the depth of the water below the keel, the performance of the engines, and the status of dozens of other parameters, all from a position at the bridge console that allows them to look up and forward through the windows at the actual ocean ahead. The Dynamic Positioning System, DP, allows the ship to hold a precise position in open water using the azipod propulsion units and the bow thrusters without anchoring. When a cruise ship anchors in a bay and ferries passengers ashore by tender boat, the ship is not simply drifting. The DP system or the watch team is actively managing the vessel's position, compensating for wind and current to keep the ship in the designated anchorage position. This is a continuous, active process that runs silently beneath the surface of the experience for the passengers, who are simply aware that the ship is there, stable, when they return from their shore excursion. The watch system on a cruise ship bridge follows the same 4-on, 8-off rotation used in cargo shipping. One officer on watch at all times, responsible for the navigation and the safety of the vessel. The captain may be on the bridge for arrivals and departures, for transits through particularly demanding waterways, and for any situation that the watch officer considers to require the master's presence. At sea, in open water, in fair weather, the captain may not be on the bridge for hours. The watch officer handles the routine. International maritime law gives the captain of any vessel authority that is, in certain respects, broader than that of almost any other officer in any other profession. Under the conventions of the law of the sea, the master of a vessel is the highest authority aboard. Their decisions on matters of safety and navigation are final and cannot be overridden by the vessel's owners or operators while the ship is at sea. The captain can detain persons who threaten the safety of the vessel. They can perform marriages, though this authority, long credited to ship's captains, actually depends on the flag state of the vessel and the jurisdiction of the parties involved, and is not universal. They bear personal legal responsibility for decisions made under their command. On the bridge of the Icon of the Seas, navigating a Caribbean itinerary in clear weather, none of these extraordinary authorities is likely to be exercised today. The officer on watch checks the radar, logs the position, notes the weather. The ship continues at 22 knots. The ocean is wide, and everything is exactly as it should be. Above the waterline, the ship belongs to the passengers. Below the waterline and behind the scenes, the engine rooms, the galleys, the laundry, the crew accommodation decks, the service corridors. The ship belongs to the crew. 2,350 people who are not on holiday, who are working contracts of typically 4 to 6 months, who have come from dozens of countries to do the specific jobs that this ship requires and that no ship can do without. The nationality profile of a cruise ship crew reflects the global maritime labour market in a specific way. The officers, the captain and the navigation and engineering officers tend to come from countries with strong maritime education traditions. Italy, Greece, Norway, the United Kingdom, Croatia. The hotel department, the largest department on a cruise ship by headcount, responsible for the staterooms, the restaurants, the bars, the entertainment, and the passenger-facing services, draws heavily from the Philippines, Indonesia, India, and the Caribbean nations, where the cruise ship industry has been a significant source of overseas employment for decades. The technical and engineering ratings come from a similarly broad international pool. English is the working language of the ship, the language of safety procedures, of bridge communication, of the crew announcements that passengers hear, and of the instructions that crew members give each other across departmental boundaries. But in the crew mess, in the crew accommodation corridors, in the service areas below the passenger decks, the languages of dozens of nationalities are present simultaneously, shifting between them based on who is speaking to whom. The crew areas of a large cruise ship are a world within the world. The crew mess, where the ratings eat, different from the officer mess where the officers eat, is a cafeteria-style space serving food appropriate to the multinational crew, with cuisines reflecting the nationalities most represented aboard. The crew bar is a social space available to off-duty crew. The crew gym, the crew laundry, the small crew pool on some ships. These are the amenities that sustain 4 to 6 month contracts in an environment where the work is intensive and the personal space is limited. A crew cabin is small, considerably smaller than the smallest passenger stateroom, shared in some cases with one other crew member, private in others for officers. The contracts are structured differently from seafarer contracts on cargo ships. Cruise ship crew typically work 7 days a week for the duration of their contract, with their rest periods regulated by the Maritime Labour Convention's minimum rest requirements. 10 hours of rest in any 24-hour period, 77 hours in any 7-day period. The work is physically demanding in ways specific to its nature. A stateroom steward cleaning and resetting perhaps 15 cabins per day. A dining room waiter managing multiple tables across multiple seatings. A deck officer on bridge watch for 4 hours at a stretch. At the end of the contract, the crew member flies home. Another crew member arrives to take their position. The ship continues without interruption. The arrival and departure of crew members is a managed, continuous process that happens at every port call. The service access points on the lower decks, handling crew changes alongside the provisioning and the technical requirements of the port stop. 2,350 people who are, right now, in the service corridors and the galleys and the engine rooms of this ship, working through the night, while the passengers sleep above them, making the cruise possible for someone who will never meet most of them, and who will, if the ship is doing what it should do, never need to think about this, That invisibility is the achievement. By 11 at night, the ship has settled into the particular quiet of a vessel underway after the entertainment program has ended. The main theatre let out its last show at 10:30. The pools closed at 11. The specialty restaurants completed their last seatings before 10. The casino and the bars remain open. There are always people awake on a ship this large. But the sound level in the public spaces has dropped significantly, and the promenade deck, which held hundreds of walkers and leaning against the rail observers during the evening, is now largely empty, except for the occasional couple making a slow circuit. The staterooms are occupied. Through the thousands of balcony doors on the ship's sides, the lights go out in sequence over the course of an hour or so. 10 o'clock, 10:30, 11. The ship's exterior profile changing as the occupied decks dim, until the vessel shows mainly the navigation lights, the running lights on the mast, and the scattered cabin lights of the people who are still awake. But the ship has not quietened. The ship can never quiet, because the ship is an engineering system that runs continuously, and engineering systems that run continuously produce sound. The engines below are generating the electricity that powers everything aboard, the lighting of the corridors that must remain lit for safety, the HVAC systems maintaining the temperature in every public space and every stateroom, the refrigeration units in the galleys, the water systems. The azipod units below the hull are applying the thrust that maintains the ship's 22-knot cruise speed. The desalination plants are running their overnight cycle, producing the fresh water that tomorrow's passengers will use. This sound, the composite, low-frequency hum of a vessel at full sea operation, is not loud in the staterooms. The designers and engineers who built the ship invested significantly in acoustic insulation and vibration damping to keep the machinery noise out of the passenger spaces. The result is a background noise level in the staterooms that experienced cruisers describe as a gentle, constant hum. Not a specific mechanical sound, not an identifiable rhythm, but a presence. The ship breathing, the ship working. On the bridge, the watch officer is alone with the instruments. The radar is painting. The chart plotter shows the vessel's track. The ocean outside the bridge windows is dark. The Caribbean night sky on a clear evening shows the stars with a clarity that the well-lit ship makes paradoxical. The ship generating so much light outward into the water that the stars visible above, away from the ship's direct illumination, are actually brighter than they would be from many coastal locations. From the bridge wing, the open platform extending out from the bridge on each side, where the watch officer can go to observe the ship's sides and what is happening around the vessel. The ship's own wake is visible below and behind. A white trail of phosphorescent water glowing faintly in the Caribbean dark, extending back for hundreds of meters before fading into the undisturbed surface. In one of the staterooms on deck 9, the balcony door is slightly open. The sound of the ocean at cruise speed, the rush of water along the hull, the low, constant note of the engines felt more than heard, enters the room. The passenger in the bed is already asleep. They have been asleep since 10:30. They will wake tomorrow to a different sea and a different sky. But tonight, the ship carries them. The ocean carries the ship, and the night carries all of it forward. The stateroom is the ship made personal. Everything else aboard a large cruise ship is shared. The pools, the restaurants, the theatres, the promenade. The stateroom is the one space that belongs for the duration of the voyage, exclusively to the person who booked it. Its design reflects this responsibility. It must be comfortable enough to sleep in, functional enough to live in for a week, and compact enough to be replicated 2,800 times across the vessel without the ship becoming impossibly heavy or impossibly expensive. The interior stateroom, the most affordable category on most ships, with no window, positioned in the interior of the ship's accommodation decks, is typically around 14 to 17 square meters. This is a small room by most residential standards, but a carefully designed one. The bed oriented to make the most of the available floor space. The storage distributed across wardrobes, drawers under the bed, shelving above the desk, and the bathroom. Itself a model of compact engineering, with a shower cubicle, a toilet, and a basin in a space of perhaps 3 square meters, positioned to leave the maximum usable floor area in the main cabin. The ocean view stateroom is the same footprint with a window, a fixed porthole, or a picture window, depending on the deck and the vessel, framing the ocean outside and connecting the interior space to the world beyond it in a way that significantly changes the experience of the room. Natural light arrives. The color of the ocean is present. Day and night register differently from inside the room, the sky outside providing the temporal cues that the interior stateroom cannot. The balcony stateroom adds the private outdoor space, a small terrace, perhaps 4 meters by 2, separated from the cabin interior by a sliding glass door, and from the ocean by a steel railing or a glass panel. The balcony transforms the stateroom from a room on a ship into something closer to a room on a very slow, very large moving terrace. The ocean is present not merely visually, but acoustically and atmospherically. The sound of the ship's passage through the water, the warmth or the coolness of the air, the smell of the sea. From a balcony stateroom, the wake extends behind the vessel in a continuous white trail, and the horizon is present in the peripheral vision of someone reading in the balcony chair. The design of the balcony railing requires specific consideration. The railing must be high enough to meet the safety standards for a location from which falling would be fatal, and robust enough to withstand the structural loads of a ship in a seaway, but transparent or open enough that it does not block the view that is the primary reason the balcony stateroom costs more than the ocean view below it. The current standard on modern cruise ships is a glass or tempered acrylic panel, floor to railing height, providing an unobstructed view while meeting the required structural and safety standards. The bedding is changed between every sailing. The towels are replaced daily. The steward, who services the cabins on their assigned section, typically 15 to 17 staterooms per steward, makes up the beds, cleans the bathroom, restocks the toiletries, and performs the specific requests of the passengers in each cabin twice daily on most ships. The total linen and towel production for a large cruise ship over a 7-day voyage is a significant industrial operation. We will spend an entire chapter on it, but for now, the balcony door is open a crack. The sound of the ocean at cruise speed is in the room. The bed is made with the precision of a good hotel, and the pillow is exactly where it should be. And outside the balcony door, the Caribbean night is warm and dark, and the wake glows white in the water below. The room is small, but the ocean outside it is not, and tonight they belong to you. Below the waterline, the ship has a different face. The hull below the waterline is a working surface, painted in anti-fouling paint to prevent the growth of marine organisms that would increase drag, shaped by the naval architects to minimize the resistance that the water presents to the ship's forward passage, and equipped with the mechanical systems that give the vessel its maneuverability and its stability. The stabilizer fins extend from the hull on both sides amidships, retractable hydrofoil surfaces, each perhaps 5 meters in span, that deploy when the ship is underway in a seaway and generate an upward or downward force on the side of the ship to resist rolling. The fins work by rotating about their horizontal axis. When the ship begins to roll to starboard, the starboard fin is angled to generate a downward force on the starboard side, and the port fin to generate an upward force on the port side, opposing the roll before it develops. The control system that manages the stabilizer fins reads the ship's roll rate from gyroscopes and adjusts the fin angle continuously, typically faster than once per second, to counteract the sea's attempts to rock the vessel. A fully loaded large cruise ship without stabilizers in a moderate ocean swell would roll enough to make movement around the public spaces uncomfortable and to make the experience of passengers who are prone to seasickness significantly worse. The stabilizer fins do not eliminate all motion. They cannot. The ship is still floating in a moving sea, but they reduce the roll amplitude to a level that most passengers do not consciously register. The ship moves in a seaway, but it moves less than the physics of an unstabilized hull in those conditions would produce. The azipod propulsion units below the hull are the most visually distinctive feature of the underwater hull of a modern diesel-electric cruise ship. Each azipod is a pod-shaped nacelle containing the electric motor, mounted on a shaft that passes through the hull and allows the pod to rotate through the full 360 degrees of horizontal rotation. The propeller, fixed pitch, not variable like some propeller systems, is attached to the forward end of the pod, pulling the ship forward rather than pushing it from behind. This pulling configuration, called a tractor arrangement, is more hydrodynamically efficient than a pusher arrangement and produces less turbulence in the water entering the propeller disc. Large cruise ships typically have 2 azipod units positioned toward the stern. The combination of 2 independently rotating azipods provides the vector thrust maneuverability that replaces the rudder entirely. The bow thrusters, tunnel thrusters, mounted transversely through the bow section, 1 or more on each side, supplement the azipods at low speeds when their rotational thrust is less effective. The hull form below the waterline has been optimized through extensive model testing and computational fluid dynamics analysis during the ship's design phase. The shape of the bow, the underwater fullness of the hull, amidships, where the greatest volume of water must be displaced, the taper toward the stern. All of these have been refined to minimize the resistance that the water presents, while maximizing the internal volume available for the ship's hotel function. The design constraint that distinguishes a cruise ship hull from a cargo ship hull is precisely this. The cruise ship must provide maximum internal volume for staterooms, for public spaces, for the machinery and service spaces that support them, while minimizing the power required to move that volume through the water at cruise speed. The hull shape visible above the waterline, the high white topsides, the multiple balcony decks stacked above each other, is the hotel. The hull shape below the waterline is the engineering. Both are the result of decades of refinement. Below the waterline, invisible to everyone aboard, working, every moment of every voyage. The ship arrives at the island at 7 in the morning, not to the dock. The dock at this particular port is too short for a vessel of this length, and the water in the harbour too shallow for the ship's draft. The ship anchors in the bay, a mile offshore, and the tenders begin. The tender boats, typically the ship's own lifeboats, used for this secondary purpose on tender port calls, are lowered from their davits and brought to the embarkation platform on the lower passenger deck, and the passengers queue in the ship's atrium for the tender tickets that determined their order of departure. The first tenders go ashore at 7:30. The last return from shore at 4 in the afternoon. In the hours between, the town and the beach and the market receive the ship's passengers in waves. The population of the island temporarily and dramatically increased by the arrival of several thousand visitors. While the passengers are ashore, the ship is not resting. The service doors on the lower decks are open. The provision trucks that have been waiting at the dock since before dawn begin their work. Fresh produce, the vegetables and fruit that have the shortest shelf life and must be replenished at every port call, is loaded on pallets and carried aboard by the provisioning crew, checked against the delivery manifest, and stowed in the appropriate refrigerated or dry storage areas. The fuel bunker barge, if refueling is scheduled, comes alongside and begins the transfer of LNG or marine diesel to the vessel's tanks. Fresh water is taken aboard through the water connections on the dock, supplementing what the desalination plant has produced during the passage. The technical maintenance that requires the ship to be stationary, the work that cannot be done while the vessel is underway, is performed during the port call. A team of engineers works on a piece of machinery that has been scheduled for inspection. The hotel maintenance team addresses the punch list of minor repairs and adjustments that has accumulated since the last port. The stateroom light that needs a new LED, the pool filter that requires cleaning, the deck fitting that needs resecuring. The provision master reviews the inventory and confirms the loading against the planned quantities. The shore excursion teams are ashore with the passengers. The port agent, the local representative of the cruise line, the person who manages the ship's relationships with the port authority, the local suppliers, and the officials who inspect the vessel at each call, is aboard for the formalities that international maritime law requires at every port entry. At 4:15, the last tender returns. The embarkation platform closes. The anchor is weighed, the windlass turning, the chain coming up through the hawse pipe link by link, the anchor breaking out of the seabed and ascending to the hawse. The azipods engage. The ship turns in the bay. By 5 o'clock, the island is behind the vessel. By 6, it has sunk below the horizon. The passengers are on the pool deck with their drinks, watching it go. The ship is already thinking about tomorrow. The provisioning is stowed. The engines are at cruise speed. The desalination plants are running. The galleys are preparing dinner. The sea day that follows, a port call, is the quietest day of the voyage. The passengers are tired from the heat and the walking and the sun. The ship feels calm and inward. The dining rooms fill at the usual times and empty without the late lingering of the first days at sea. By 10, the ship is dark and quiet, moving through the night toward the next island. In the lower decks of the ship, in a space that passengers never visit and most never know exists, the laundry runs 24 hours a day. The scale of the operation follows directly from the scale of the vessel. For a large cruise ship on a 7-day voyage, the laundry processes approximately 14,000 bedsheets and pillowcases per week. The linen for the ship's passenger staterooms changed between every sailing and refreshed during the sailing, as required by the service standard of each cabin category. On top of the bed linen, the bath towels and hand towels and face cloths from the passenger bathrooms replaced daily. The tablecloths and napkins from the main dining room and the specialty restaurants laundered after each service. The uniforms of 2,350 crew members, the whites of the galley staff, the formal dress of the dining room team, the polo shirts and trousers of the guest services officers, the coveralls of the engine room engineers, the industrial washing machines and dryers in the cruise ship laundry are not scaled versions of domestic machines. They are continuous feed tunnel washers, large horizontal cylinders through which laundry passes progressively from the loading end to the unloading end. The wash cycle completing as each batch of linen moves through the washing, rinsing, and extraction zones within a single continuous machine. A large tunnel washer can process several hundred kilograms of linen per hour, running continuously. The water for the washing comes from the ship's fresh water supply, which is to say, ultimately from the reverse osmosis plants extracting it from the ocean. The sorting and folding is done by hand. After the tunnel washer, the sheets and tablecloths pass through a large ironing and folding machine, a calendar, that presses and folds them in a single automated pass. But the sorting before washing and the final assembly after folding involves human attention. The laundry staff checking each item, removing anything too worn for further service, folding to the standard that the service level requires, distributing the folded linen to the housekeeping trolleys that the stateroom stewards will use on their cabin rounds. The uniform care is a separate stream within the laundry operation. The formal uniforms worn by the dining room and reception staff must be pressed to the standard that passenger-facing positions require. The creases sharp, the epaulets properly situated, the whole effect consistent with the presentation the cruise line wants passengers to experience. 900 uniforms pressed daily on one Oasis-class ship, according to reported figures. The economy of scale that makes cruise ships financially viable applies to the laundry as much as to the kitchen. The cost per item laundered on a large cruise ship is significantly lower than any equivalent land-based hotel operation could achieve, because the volume of items processed justifies the investment in industrial equipment and the staffing levels that the volume requires. Outside the laundry, the ship is a resort. Inside it, a factory. Both things are true simultaneously, and the resort would not be possible without the factory. The sheets in the stateroom are clean because the laundry has been running since last week, and tomorrow it will still be running, quietly below the passenger decks, in the part of the ship that the cruise experience depends on, but is not designed to see. The ocean around the cruise ship at night is not empty. Standing at the stern rail on an upper deck, looking back along the wake, the white trail of disturbed water extending behind the ship for several hundred meters before fading into the undisturbed surface. The ocean appears dark and featureless. The ship's lights reach a little way into the surrounding water, illuminating the immediate surface in amber and white. Beyond that radius, the sea is black, the waves visible only as moving shapes against the slightly lighter sky, and then only when the moon is up. but in the water and visible in the right conditions, the bioluminescence. In the warm waters of the Caribbean and the tropical Pacific, the surface ocean is populated by dinoflagellates, single-celled marine organisms that produce a brief flash of blue-green light when mechanically disturbed. The bow wave of a large cruise ship pushing through water dense with these organisms produces a cold blue-green fire that runs along the hull from the bow back along both sides. The same phenomenon that a sailing yacht produces at a fraction of the scale. In the wake astern, where the azipods and the hull have churned the water, the bioluminescence is particularly intense. A glowing trail of blue-green light in the dark water that extends behind the ship for hundreds of meters and is visible from the upper decks if you are watching for it. The marine life in the water around the ship is present but mostly invisible in the dark. Pods of dolphins are occasionally attracted to the bow wave and can be seen from the forward observation deck or the bridge wings, their movements traceable by the bioluminescent trails they leave in the disturbed water. Each dolphin a moving shape of blue-green light, travelling at bow wave speed and leaving a brief luminous trail that fades as the water settles. Flying fish, disturbed by the ship's approach, break the surface and glide for 50 or 100 meters before re-entering the water. On the open observation deck, the highest passenger deck, open to the sky, the stars above the ship are bright enough to be striking to anyone who has spent their life in or near a city. The ship is in the middle of the ocean, its nearest shore perhaps 500 kilometers distant in any direction, and there is no light pollution at that distance. The Milky Way is visible as a structural feature of the sky, rather than a faint suggestion of one. The planets are vivid and steady. The horizon, if the night is clear, is a perfectly defined line between the slightly darker sea and the slightly lighter sky. The temperature at the stern rail on a Caribbean night is warm, 25 or 26 degrees, even at midnight, the sea air carrying the particular humidity and salt character of the tropics. The wind of the ship's own passage provides a slight cooling effect on the face, flowing from ahead as the vessel moves through the still warm air of a calm Caribbean night. There are people at the rail. There are always a few people at the rail on the late evening, open deck, the ones who are not sleepy yet, the ones who prefer this to the casino, the ones who came specifically for this and have been coming back to this railing every night of the voyage. They stand there quietly, watching the wake, watching the stars, listening to the sound of the ocean passing the ship's hull. The ship is an island of light in an enormous dark, and the dark is alive. And tonight, from the stern rail, all of it is visible. If you are paying attention, if you come out and look. The cruise ship does not navigate by instinct. It navigates by a layered system of electronic positioning, radar, communication, and decision support that represents the accumulated engineering investment of decades of maritime technology development, managed by officers whose training and certification requirements are governed by the International Convention on Standards of Training, Certification, and Watchkeeping, the STCW Convention, which sets the minimum global standard for what a watchkeeping officer aboard any commercial vessel must know and be able to do. The voyage plan for a 7-day Caribbean cruise itinerary is prepared by the navigation officer before the vessel leaves its home port. The plan defines the ship's intended track as a sequence of waypoints, latitude and longitude coordinates, connected by the rhumb-line or great circle segments that form the most efficient route given the geography and the draft requirements of the vessel. The waypoints are entered into the ECDIS, the electronic chart display and information system, which displays the vessel's GPS-derived position against the digital chart, shows the planned track as a line the helmsman steers to follow, and provides continuous alerts when the vessel's position deviates from the track by more than the specified tolerance. The radar system on a modern cruise ship operates simultaneously on two frequencies, typically S-band and X-band, to provide complementary coverage in different weather and sea conditions. The S-band radar has a longer range but less resolution. The X-band provides better resolution of nearby targets. Both feeds into the ARPA, Automatic Radar Plotting Aid, which tracks all radar contacts, calculates their course and speed, predicts their closest point of approach to the vessel, and alerts the watch officer to any contact that presents a risk of collision. The AIS, Automatic Identification System, supplements the radar by broadcasting the vessel's own identity, position, course, and speed to all other AIS-equipped vessels within range, and receiving the same information from them. The AIS display shows the positions and movements of other vessels as overlaid information on the electronic chart, providing the watch officer with a picture of the traffic in the surrounding area that goes beyond what the radar alone can resolve. The Caribbean itinerary presents different navigation challenges from the open ocean voyages that characterize the repositioning crossings between seasons. The Caribbean is an island-dense environment with significant maritime traffic. Cruise ships, cargo vessels, ferries, fishing boats, private yachts, all operating in the same waters. The passages between islands require careful attention to the charted depths, to the traffic separation schemes at the major ports, and to the weather that the Caribbean generates through the summer season. The Mediterranean, where many of the same vessels operate during the European summer, presents its own specific demands. The congested straits, the dense port traffic, the seasonal northerly winds, the fog that forms in certain regions at certain times of year. The watch officer on the Mediterranean itinerary is managing a different set of considerations from the Caribbean officer, though the tools and the training are the same. The GPS position that the ECDIS displays is accurate to a few meters under normal conditions, accurate enough that the vessel can be navigated through a channel that is barely wider than the ship's beam with confidence in the indicated position. This precision was not available before satellite navigation. Before GPS, the navigator in these same waters used radar ranges and bearings from charted landmarks, depth soundings referenced against the charted depths, and celestial observations when conditions allowed. The tools have changed, the ocean has not, and the watch officer at the ECDIS console is doing the same thing that navigators have always done, trying to know exactly where the ship is, and making sure it stays where it should be. The ships that came before, the great ocean liners of the early 20th century, were not cruise ships. They were transport. The Mauretania, launched in 1907, held the blue riband, the record for the fastest Atlantic crossing. For 22 years, her quadruple screw steam turbines driving her at over 27 knots on the run between Southampton and New York. The people who sailed on her were going somewhere. The crossing was not the point. Getting there was the point, and getting there quickly was the premium. The luxury of the first-class accommodation, the smoking rooms, the dining saloons, the promenade decks, was a supplement to the purpose of the voyage, not the purpose itself. The Queen Mary, which entered service in 1936, continued this tradition at a scale that remains awe-inspiring. 81,000 gross tons, 310 meters long, a passenger complement of over 2,000 in 3 classes. Her Art Deco interiors, designed by a team of leading British designers, were the most ambitious decorative program applied to any ship to that point. The first-class dining room, spanning the full width of the ship, 3 decks high, lit by windows and by concealed lighting, that created a continuous warm glow across a space that could seat 800 people simultaneously. The Queen Mary sailed between Southampton and New York on the established express service, 5 days, weather permitting, until the Second World War redirected her as a troop ship. The transition from liner to cruise ship happened gradually through the 1960s and 1970s, driven by a combination of factors. The jet aircraft made the transatlantic crossing, the primary market for the great liners, obsolete as transportation. A flight from London to New York took 7 hours. The Queen Mary took 5 days. When price and time were comparable, the overwhelming majority of travellers chose the plane. The shipping companies that had operated the liners faced a choice: retire the ships or find another use for them. The use they found was the cruise. The voyage not as transportation, but as leisure. The ship itself as the destination, rather than the means to it. The itinerary would take the ship to warm weather ports. The passengers would have time ashore, and the experience of being on the ship, the meals, the entertainment, the socializing, would be designed to be pleasurable rather than simply adequate. This reorientation changed everything about ship design. The liner was built to cross the North Atlantic in comfort and speed. Its hull was deep and heavily built to handle heavy seas. Its superstructure relatively modest in proportion to its hull, because the stability demands of the Atlantic required a low center of gravity. The cruise ship was built to carry people in warm water comfort. Its hull could be shallower and its superstructure taller, because it would avoid the worst weather, because the warm water destinations it served had calmer seas, and because passengers wanted views from higher decks, private balconies, outdoor pools. The first purpose-built cruise ship in the modern sense is generally considered to be the Sunward, built for Norwegian Caribbean lines in 1966. A small vessel by later standards, carrying 500 passengers on Caribbean itineraries from Miami. She established the template: warm weather destination, short itinerary, ship as resort. By the 1970s, the model was established. By the 1990s, the ships had grown to sizes the early cruise industry could not have imagined. By 2024, the icon of the seas, 15 times the size of the Sunward. The voyage still the point, the ship still the destination, the idea the same idea, grown over 60 years of industry into its current extraordinary form. Inside the walls of the ship, thousands of kilometers of cable run, not a metaphor, a literal measurement. A large modern cruise ship contains approximately 5,000 kilometers of electrical cable, routing power and data and control signals from the 6 generators in the engine rooms through the thousands of circuits that serve the vessel's systems. The cable runs through dedicated conduits and cable trays that are built into the ship's structure, behind the finished surfaces of the passenger spaces, inside the ceiling, voids of the crew corridors, along the frames of the hull itself. Most of it will never be seen by anyone except the electricians who maintain it. The electrical load of a large cruise ship in full operation is enormous. The engines generate the power, the hotel systems consume it. The lighting in the passenger spaces, the public rooms, the corridors, the staterooms, the exterior lighting, is a significant load, even in the era of LED technology that has substantially reduced the per-fixture consumption compared to the incandescent and fluorescent lighting it replaced. The air conditioning system is the largest single electrical consumer on most cruise ships, maintaining comfortable temperatures throughout the accommodation and public spaces in a hot, humid tropical environment against the heat input from the sun, from the bodies of 10,000 people, and from the cooking and machinery below, represents a continuous, substantial electrical demand. The HVAC system, the heating, ventilation, and air conditioning infrastructure, maintains different conditions in different zones of the ship simultaneously. The passenger cabins and public spaces are cooled to the comfortable range preferred by the occupants. The kitchens are ventilated to manage the heat of the cooking equipment and to meet the air quality standards for food preparation spaces. The engine rooms are ventilated to manage the very significant heat output of the generators and propulsion machinery. The medical center, the provision storage areas, the food preparation spaces, each have their own temperature and air quality requirements managed by the system. The plumbing serves the same 10,000 people. Fresh water is distributed from the storage tanks through hot and cold circuits to every stateroom, every public bathroom, every galley, every pool. The wastewater, grey water from showers, sinks and laundries, black water from the toilets, is collected in separate systems and processed through the ship's advanced wastewater treatment plant before being discharged in compliance with international regulations. The discharge standards for cruise ships operating in certain sensitive maritime environments, Alaska, the Norwegian fjords, the Galapagos Islands, are more stringent than the international standard, and some vessels are required to hold their treated wastewater until they are in open ocean and can discharge without risk to the local marine environment. The communication systems within the ship include the public address system, through which ship-wide announcements are made, the telephone system connecting the bridge to every department, the fire detection and suppression systems networked throughout the vessel, and the passenger entertainment systems delivering internet, television, and telephone service to every stateroom. The internet connection is provided by satellite, the same VSAT technology used on cargo ships, with the significant difference that the cruise ship's demand is orders of magnitude higher, because 7,600 passengers all want to post photographs of their breakfast. The ship is a city. Cities have infrastructure, 5,000 kilometers of cable, kilometers of pipe, the entire invisible skeleton of a modern city, compressed into 365 meters of floating steel, running continuously, tonight as every night, making the visible world possible. Behind the ship, the wake extends, not for 100 meters, or a kilometer, or even 10 kilometers, though 10 kilometers is where it is last visible to the naked eye from the deck. The wake of a large cruise ship moving at 22 knots persists as a detectable disruption of the ocean surface for far longer than any passenger watching it from the stern rail ever sees. Satellite imagery has recorded the wakes of large vessels remaining visible on the ocean surface for up to 100 kilometers behind the ship, the disturbed water distinguishable from the undisturbed surface around it by the difference in surface roughness that synthetic aperture radar can detect. The wake is not a single thing. It is a system. The most visible component from the deck, the white churned water directly behind the azipods and the hull, is the turbulent wake produced by the propellers and the hull's passage disrupting the water and entraining air bubbles that give the white appearance. This portion of the wake fades relatively quickly as the bubbles rise and the turbulence dissipates, typically within a kilometer or two of the ship. Further back, the wave wake extends. A ship moving through water creates a pattern of waves that radiate from the vessel in a specific geometric pattern. The Kelvin wake, named after Lord Kelvin, who proved in 1887 that the half angle of the wake pattern is always approximately 19.5 degrees, regardless of the ship's speed or hull shape. This mathematical fact, derived from the physics of water wave propagation, means that the wake pattern of any ship, from a rowing boat to the largest cruise ship, makes the same angle with the ship's track. The waves in this pattern can be detected as surface disturbances long after the visible turbulent wake has faded, and they carry the energy of the ship's passage outward from the track in both directions. The biological effect of the wake has been studied in the context of the large numbers of cruise ships operating in ecologically sensitive areas. In the fjords of Norway and the inland passages of Alaska, where cruise ships operate in close proximity to glaciers and to the marine mammals that inhabit these cold water environments, the wakes generated at cruise speed can disturb the behavior of whales and other cetaceans, and the wash from the propellers can cause erosion of sensitive intertidal habitats. Speed restrictions in these areas reduce the wake size and the associated disturbance. Another instance, specific to the cruise ship context, of the principle that reducing speed has compounding benefits beyond the immediate fuel saving. For the passenger standing at the stern rail, watching the wake disappear into the tropical evening, none of this is immediately apparent. The wake is simply the most visible consequence of the ship's passage. The evidence that the ship was here, drawn in white on the dark water, already beginning its slow erasure. The ocean settles. The surface that was churned by the propellers becomes smooth again. The waves of the Kelvin pattern spread and diminish. 10 minutes behind the ship, the water shows no evidence that anything has passed. The ocean closes its record. It does not keep the account of what has moved through it. The ship has been here. The ocean has received it. And behind the ship, the wake tells the story of the passage for a while. And then it tells nothing. And the water is as it always was, as if the ship had never been there at all. The ship has been running for 6 days now. 6 days since the city lights fell astern at departure. 6 days of the engines at their steady power, the azipods turning, the desalination plants processing the ocean into drinking water, the galleys cycling through their 30,000 daily meals, the laundry running continuously below the passenger decks. 6 days of sea days and port calls and tender rides and meals in the dining room and nights in the stateroom with the balcony door open a crack and the ocean sound in the room. tomorrow is the last sea day before arrival. The itinerary shows open water, the final stretch of ocean between the last island and the home port, the miles that bring the voyage back to its beginning. There is a particular quality to the last sea day of a cruise that the first sea day does not have. The first sea day is possibility. The last sea day is completion. The savouring of what is almost finished. The deliberate attention to the things that will be ordinary again in 24 hours. The stern rail in the evening. The particular amber light in the corridor. The sound the ship makes. You have spent this voyage learning what this ship is. You know now that the vessel moving through the Caribbean tonight at 22 knots is powered by 6 multi-fuel engines generating electricity for azipod propulsion units that can rotate through the full 360 degrees beneath the hull, and that the ship can berth alongside without tugs. You know that the fresh water in your stateroom came from the ocean around you, forced through a semi-permeable membrane at 50 times atmospheric pressure until the salt was left behind. You know that 180 tons of food were loaded before the voyage began, and that 425 chefs are preparing 30,000 meals today, as they prepared 30,000 meals every day of the crossing. You know that 5,000 kilometers of electrical cable run through the walls around you, and that the HVAC system is maintaining your stateroom at 22 degrees, while the engine room below is significantly warmer, and that the stabilizer fins extended from the hull amidships have been running their continuous, gyroscopically controlled counter-rotation since the ship entered the open sea, reducing the roll that the Caribbean swell would otherwise produce. You know that the Kelvin wake behind the ship makes the same angle with the track as the wake of any ship of any size, because the mathematics of wave propagation in water is the same, regardless of what is causing the waves. You know that the first purpose-built cruise ship in the modern sense was 500 passengers in the Caribbean in 1966, and that the icon of the seas carries 7,600, and that the idea is the same idea: the voyage as the experience, the ship as the destination, the ocean as the context in which a different pace of life becomes briefly available. The bridge officer on watch is checking the radar. The galley is baking tomorrow morning's bread. The laundry is processing the tablecloths from tonight's dinner service. And in a stateroom on deck 9, the balcony door is open a crack. Before you close your eyes tonight, one small thing that means a great deal to this channel. Please hit the like button and subscribe if you haven't yet, because tomorrow night we will be here again with another story built exactly for this hour. Your place is kept, but for now, the engines are steady. The stars are above the open deck, vivid over open ocean. The wake extends behind the ship in a white trail that will settle and vanish in the dark water, and the ocean that the ship is crossing will close behind it without record or remainder. The ship moves. The night holds. The water makes its sound against the hull far below. Sleep well.